over the Data Analysis Capstone Project, which is going to act as the final assignment for this course, and it's going to allow students to apply their knowledge and skills that they gained over this course to a real-world scenario. Now, the scenario in question is that we have ABC Department Store, which is a national retail chain specializing in luxury merchandise, and their product range is everything from food and toys to books, home goods, and personal care products. So they have numerous storefronts across the country, and so because of that, management wants to use data-driven decision making to maintain their competitive edge. So the dataset provided for this project captures the operations of one ABC storefront over the course of a quarter, so 3 months. It contains transaction records, product details, inventory levels, and just generally key business metrics. So the whole idea is that the student has been hired as a data analyst at the ABC department store, and they are tasked with evaluating the store's quarterly performance, just so that the management can gain insights to improve the business outcomes. So, what are the requirements for a student to successfully execute this project? So, first off, they're going to need to demonstrate some level of Excel proficiency. So, that's everything from the basics of data processing, so from cleaning and preparing data sets to applying the formulas. And those are going to be basic ifs and average formulas, as well as more advanced stuff. So, VLOOKUP and trimming and stuff like that. And this is also kind of manipulate and classify the data. Furthermore, they're going to need to know how to construct pivot tables and pivot charts in order to summarize the business metrics. So think about stuff like revenue and profit and even employee performance. They're going to need to know how to construct VBA macros in order to automate repetitive tasks, such as generating pivot tables. So they should know how to do it from scratch as well as how to automate it. Now, from a data analysis perspective, they're going to need to utilize the data analysis toolkit to calculate statistical information, so such as correlation between certain metrics, linear regression, stuff like that. And they're also going to need to be able to evaluate these statistical results. So, what do these things mean? How can they interpret the results to provide information that lets management make plans based off this data? And they're going to do this using line charts, scatter plots, and dashboards. Now, carrying on from that, they're going to need to have some sort of ability to identify and explain revenue and profit trends over the quarter. So, why is profit falling? Is there a correlation between profit trends and certain times of the week? Different metrics like that. They're going to have to assess or be able to assess which product categories are most impactful and which aren't doing as well, as well as which employees are performing best. Finally, they're going to have to be able to produce a two-page report or executive summary that really communicates their findings and provides actionable recommendations. So this is going to be very thorough. It will include visualizations, charts, graphs, just to strengthen the insights, as well as generally be presented professionally. So stuff like clarity, organization, and professionalism will also be evaluated in addition to statistical results. So just to kind of sum it up, the deliverables are an Excel workbook with the clean databases and any generated tables or charts, any formulae and macros, as well as the two-page executive summary report. So the topics covered are going to have to just do with the things that were covered in this course. So data cleaning and preparation. So everything involved in making sure the data is ready for analysis. So making sure there's no repeated values, there's consistency in formatting, etc. There's going to be a profit performance analysis using the data analysis toolpack, which is going to allow the student to utilize statistical methods to evaluate performance metrics. So we're going to be looking at how employees have achieved or whether employees have achieved their deliverables, assess trends, look at which employees need training and such insights. We're going to look at business metrics and statistical analysis, and we're going to take a look at inventory using VBA automation. So what products are most popular, what products aren't selling so well, And then the executive summary report just has to do with the student's ability to report and convey what they found in a more professional manner. Now, moving on directly to the structure of the data set. Um, the data set has multiple sheets which look at quarterly data across key operational areas. So the goal is to track performance, spot trends, and just connect the numbers back to the business. So we have different sheets. So we have the core metric sheets. So this captures essentials. So transaction, revenue, expenses, profit. By looking at all these together, it's going to give us a look at how sales are going, whether they're increasing or decreasing, and just generally how efficiently the business operates. Next, we're going to look at the inventory sheet. So this is tracking product categories and the average order values. This is going to help the students analyze which categories are driving sales. Is growth happening because customers are, buying more of a certain item? Just to connect operations more to customer behavior. And then there's the employee sheet, which looks at attendance, whether employees are achieving their deliverables, and regional breakdowns of these metrics. So this is going to enable management to see who top performers are, if there are more top performers in a certain region, and just help identify areas where support or training might be needed. Now we are going to look at the instructions directly for this project. So we're going to kind of go in order of the data analysis standards. So first we're going to clean the data sets using Power Query to make sure that they can be effectively analyzed. So making sure that there are no repetitive entries that can skew the data, making sure that there's consistency among formats so nothing accidentally gets left out during the analysis, um, just different things like that. We're going to evaluate the performance. So we're going to perform profit-based analysis using formulae. So this is going to be like sums, averages, as well as using pivot tables and pivot charts to kind of do a bit more of an advanced look at how the performance is. We're going to do some evaluation as well. So every piece of performance data that's analyzed, there's going to be some sort of explanation as to what it means. So the students will have to be able to interpret as well as generate the results. We're going to analyze financial metrics with ToolPak. So this is more of a statistical look. Think about correlation, linear regression, stuff like that. And then we're going to automate repetitive tasks with VBA just to be able to streamline business operations. Now, what are we going to look at? We're going to be looking at Excel proficiency, statistical proficiency, business insights and interpretation. We're going to definitely be taking a look at the presentation skills of the students and just the final deliverables. Now, I have actually created an example project. Okay, I'm not sure why it's glitching. Let me just go directly to the slide. Yeah, I've actually generated an example project, so that includes an example data set, just to kind of give a more hands-on practical overview of what the expectation for the project will be. So going directly to the project or to the data set. So here we have a data set that contains two sheets. So the first sheet, this is the sheet of diabetes patients. It's basically taken from a hospital showing 100 patients that have varying symptoms, varying different conditions, their blood sugar readings, and the attending physician that is kind of overseeing their care. And then we also have the secondary sheet, which is more of an internal sheet. So this shows the salary, hours worked, and patient loads of the different doctors that are a part of this hospital. Now, here I have some questions just to give you sort of a practical look. So the first requirement will be to clean the data set. So we're gonna try and ensure that all the formats are consistent, so each cell has only one value and that there are no duplicates. Now, going back to the screen, just off the bat, you can kind of take a look at certain columns. So here, for example, the date column, you can see that the format for the dates, they're inconsistent. So how do we go about making them consistent? What we're going to do is we're going to highlight all of the entries in the date column, and we're going to go do a right click, format cells, and then we are just going to choose a particular format for the date. I didn't specify any particular preferred format, so just for the sake of simplicity, we can go with the year first. So that's all that's needed for that part. Um, in terms of ensuring that each cell has only one value. So here we can see that for the medications, we do have some cells with multiple values. So in that case, we're going to need to split them into different columns. So to do so, that's going to involve highlighting all of them, going to the data portion of the screen on the top of the ribbon, and then we're going to choose text to column in the data tools. And then the delimiter in this case would be the different commas that are separating the medications. So here we're going to choose comma, next, and then for the destination, we're going to choose something in a different column just so that it doesn't accidentally replace any existing entries. And okay, was a bit, everything went down a bit too much. But if we do it all again, let's go back to the text to columns, delimit by comma, and then the destination can be J2. And then here, so here we can see that each medication for the particular patient is in its own row, and that just makes stuff neater. Now, the next requirement is to make sure that there are no repeated values. So to check for duplicates, what we can do is just select a particular range of things that we know are most likely to be unique to a particular patient. So we're going to look at, say, names and the attending physician. So we have to do the whole range. So we're going to select all of that. And then we're going to go home to the conditional formatting and then highlight cell rules and then choose duplicate values. Okay. And what we are really going to look out for is anything with a duplicate in first, last name, and just general, all the way across. So here we have two Zoe Mendozas with the same metrics. So the same doctor, same medications. So we can go ahead and delete those. Okay. And I believe, based on what I'm seeing, there's no other repetitive entry. Okay, and then just to make it a bit easier, we can just press clear rules from entire sheet to return it to normal. Now we're going to move on to the formula-based tasks. So the next one is going to be to create a formula to calculate the average blood sugar level per day of admission. So what's that going to look like? We're going to go back here and we're going to put it in a new column. So give it a heading. So average blood sugar. And we're going to use the average function. So that's equal average. And then the formula for this is going to be the blood sugar, which is in column C, per day. So our first step is should actually be to sort by day. So we're gonna select the entire column that has to do with the dates. We're gonna select the entire column that has to do with the dates, and we're going to sort. So select, sort, and filter, custom sort, continue with current selection, and then we're going to sort on cell values. And so here we have the dates in order. So for each day, we're going to sum the amount of entries. So it's going to be equal average and then it's the readings for that particular day over the amount. So that's 8. And then the average blood sugar. This is the average blood sugar for that particular day. And so it's going to be the same idea throughout the days. So for the 12th, the 13th, the 15th, etc., um, just select the sum the blood sugar for those days and then divide by the amount. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is we're going to create a VLOOKUP. So we're going to use a search box to return the patient's assigned doctor when the last name is entered. So to do this, first of all, the relevant formula is the VLOOKUP formula. Okay. And then the lookup value is simply the thing that we are going to be, the lookup value is the metric that we are going to be using to actually search. So in this case, since it's a search kind of function that we're doing, we're going to use an empty column, and this is going to be as if it's our search bar. So let's use, say, N7. So it's going to be VLOOKUP N7, and then the range of the things that we're searching. So just for simplicity, we can choose the whole table. And then once we do that, the required value, we are looking for the attending physician for the patient, and that is in row H, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the table array is going to be 8, and then we're going to look for an exact match. Now, since it's an exact match, we're going to have false here. And then because our search bar is N7, but N7 is empty, so that's why it says NA. But once we choose, say, a last name, so let's say Allen, then it comes up that the attending physician is Dr. Areta, which if you check the table, then you can see that it's accurate. It's the second entry. Now, going on to the next question is we're going to take a look at the Power Query function, or not Power Query, the pivot table function. So we're going to do some pivot table analysis. So the first question is to cross-tabulate the patient load versus their salary per hour. So what we're going to look at is, do the doctors with more patients earn more money per hour? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select the data set, the entire data set. So selecting it all. Next, we're going to go to Insert and then check the pivot table. And then, so we have the range. So the range is just basically the whole of the original sheet. The new worksheet is where we're going to have the pivot table once again, just so it doesn't kind of override anything that's already in the existing worksheet. So once it opens a new sheet, what we're going to do is we are going to take the attending physician heading and we're going to put that in the rows. Um, and then we're going to get our values from the patient load. Okay, so this was actually the incorrect sheet that we're doing because what we want is the patient load. So it should be from this sheet with that information. So apologies for that, but same concept. Take the entire table, highlight it, go to Insert, Pivot Table, open a new worksheet, and then the doctor is the rows, and then patient load is where we get our values. So here we can see the doctor's names and then each patient that they have. And then we're going to take salary per hour, and we're also going to get some values for that. But instead of it just being the sum, we are going to look at the average salary per hour. So we're going to summarize, we're going to right click and then summarize values by average. So once we do that, we see the average salary per hour. And then we're going to go back again on the conditional formatting to help us to highlight the insights. So we're going to highlight salary per hour that's above a certain metric. So let's say greater than $80. And then once we do that, We're going to also look at the patient load and highlight what doctor has a patient load over a certain value because those are the metrics we're comparing. So for patient load, we're going to say, let's say a patient load greater than 7. And then once we do that, we can see that although there's one doctor that has a very high salary with a relatively high patient load, there is not exactly that trend that shows that doctors with higher patient loads are amongst the ones with the highest salaries. The ones with the highest salaries have patient loads under 7. So that's kind of the insight that we gain from that. Now, next question that we have is, so we're gonna do another pivot table showing the average hours worked per patient. So we're gonna see which doctors are more efficient. So to do that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually have to create a new sort of heading because average hours per patient isn't something that came with the data set. So let's see, hours per patient. Oh, we're gonna do that actually in the original sheet too. So it's hours per patient. And then that formula is just going to be, we're gonna take the amount of patients, the amount of hours worked, and we're gonna divide it by the patient. And it's formatting in, oh, because, okay, this is a time value. This value, because it's hours, so I believe that it's been formatted in that way. If not, okay. So hours per patient, 11.33, and then we can just spread that formula to everything else. So this is the average amount of hours per patient that each doctor has worked. And we are trying to find which doctors are more efficient. So just doing a pivot table with that, we're gonna highlight the entire table, create a new pivot table in a new worksheet, and then look at the doctor for the rows, and then hours per patient for our values. And then we're gonna find the average of that. So summarize hours per average. So here we're gonna highlight these just to do a kind of conditional formatting. And let's say we're trying to find which doctors work the most or which doctors are most efficient. So most efficient, what that basically means is they take less time to do more patients, so they work faster. So say less time, let's say 15 hours. And we're also going to need to look at patient load and the values. So let's see who has the most patients. So it's less time to do more patients. So let's see greater than 7. So the more efficient doctors are Dr. Brown, Dr. Estrada, Dr. Lewis, and Dr. Thomas. Now, our next question is we're going to use a macro to automatically calculate hours per patient. So we can do it the traditional manual way, or we can do a macro to automate it just so that if there are any more doctors or any more patients come in, it's easier to calculate that. So to start that macro off, what we're gonna do is we're gonna record a macro, and um let's call it hours per patient. And then we're gonna store it in this workbook. I'm just having a bit of trouble. Okay, there we go. So now we're going to record the macro. So in the developer tab, we're going to go to recording the macro. Let's call it hours per patient. All right, store it in this workbook. And then, okay, so to edit it, all right, so let's do it. So it's starting off by sub, and then let's make the function, let's say add hours per patient. All right, and then it's going to be, we're going to start it off with okay. So this is declaring it in memory just to say that we're representing the workbook or the worksheet with the WS. Now we are going to maybe just set the workbook where we're keeping the macro in, which is the patient workbook, as workbook, and then the name. So we're gonna name it, let's, it's sheet one. that the original information was on. I think it was sheet two. All right. So now what this is doing is this is saying that the WB variable is now pointing to sheet two. Now, the next thing we're going to do is declare another variable. So the last row is going to be, let's use it as a long format just because it's going to be a number. So that just ensures that we have enough space that can hold as many numbers as possible. So it's going to hold the row number of the last filled cell in column A, in the first column. Now, this last row, we're going to need it, or we're going to actually do a line here that allows you to find the last used row in column A just so that it's put in the correct position when it's automatically generated. So that's for the worksheet. In the cells in the worksheet, we are going to count the number of rows in column A. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to insert a new column. So that's going to be, for the worksheet, we're going to insert column E because the last column that we had was column D. Now, what is the heading that we're going to put for this new column? We're going to set this by saying for the worksheet and cells 1 to 5, the value is going to be equal to hours per patient. And then the last line that we have here is we're just going to spread the formula down the new column. So for the worksheet, the range of this formula is going to be from E2, and we start at E2 because the first line, E1, is going to have our heading. So from E2 throughout the rest of the E column, and the last row, we are going to have the formula equals, and then we're going to put the formula here. And then we're going to end the subroutine. So this selects all cells from E2 down to the very last row of E. And so every column in the E is going to calculate hours per patient. All right, and then we're going to save that. And then we can run it. There's an error. Oh, so let me just make sure that everything is accurately named. Okay, so the issues in the first line. Okay, I'm not quite sure what the issue was there, but the idea is that you can create a macro to calculate the hours per patient automatically. And that's the end of the presentation.